G'day, my name's Trevor Young and welcome to the Earn the Right podcast. Today we're going to talk all about personal branding and telling your story in an AI world, because let's face it, your personal brand story has always mattered. It's always mattered, but right now it matters more than ever, I believe, and I dare say my guest believes that as well. And the reason is because AI is flooding content right throughout every channel, and the problem with that is it sounds polished, it reads well, but it kind of feels all the same. So we want to dig into what it actually takes to tell a human story in that environment. And to help us do that, we do have in the virtual studio an expert guest. His name is David J. Ebner, and he's the founder of Content Workshop. And this is a US-based story-first agency, but I prefer the way David and his team describe themselves as an eclectic group of artists, professors, entrepreneurs and marketers with creative and curious minds. David, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Trevor.
I want to delve deeper, as I mentioned, into how expert founders and thought leaders and solo practice owners can produce top-notch content very human content to build their professional brand and their business. And yes, we'll address the vexed AI question head on. But first, why don't you give us a bit of a thumbnail sketch of your good self and Content Workshop?
Yeah, sure. Well, I founded Content Workshop 13 years ago. Yeah, 13 years ago. I had to look at the calendar real quick. 13 years ago, when I was a graduate student studying to get my Master in Fine Arts degree in creative writing. At the time, making money and putting some food on the table was important as a graduate student. I don't know where all of your listeners are, but here in the U.S., student loan debt is a real thing, right? Like spending a lot of money to get that education, had to find a way to make some money in the meantime. And, freelance copywriting seemed natural. I was studying writing, so I, kind of dove into applying those storytelling tactics I was learning in the classroom commercially for brands. And this was before the term brand storytelling was a thing, and just kind of felt natural and normal. So that was the nexus of Content Workshop starting. And since then, it's always been kind of a collective of artists who have kind of trying to find ways to, use their skills commercially in one way, shape, or form. So all these years later, still doing it the same way.
Yeah, look, it's interesting. Was there ever any tension? I mean, obviously, when you're studying, university, I mean, what did you want to be a writer about or for, or whatever the term is, the craft of writing, and then you went very quickly into the commercial side of writing. Was there tension there?
Yeah, certainly. And there's actually a really big hurdle to overcome for many creative and artistic writers of whether or not they can kind of adapt their style to work commercially. It's a hurdle that some writers simply can't make. I've met many writers who I went to graduate school with who were like, "Hey, can I be a freelance copywriter for your team?" I'm like, "Yeah, let's give it a shot." And it just doesn't work, because inevitably when you're writing for a brand, you have a customer. And when you're writing for artistic purposes, you don't have one. Meaning it doesn't matter if somebody else thinks it's good or not. Now, it might not get published if people don't think it's good. However, somebody might not pay you, and it can have commercial downsides if that's a customer. So it's kind of like we talk about creativity as kind of this elusive thing, but when you're working in the commercial space and you're doing content versus just artistic writing, we think of putting that creativity in a box. And that box is the confines that the customer puts on it. Usually it's conversion or some sort of like KPI that they're trying to reach with that content. And if you're able to kind of curtail your creativity to fit inside that box, it actually is a challenge, but it's extremely exciting if you can do that, because you start to find out things about yourself that you didn't know you could do before. But a lot of people have a hard time making that leap, not just from a craft point of view, but also from kind of like what do I want to do with my life point of view. And that's a struggle that people certainly make. And I guess from that point of view, you have got commercial goals. You've got in an agency, having been in agencies all my life, you've got client imperatives, and they can
shift and change with the wind. In fact, they usually change from the brief as you get into them, and you need to adapt. And I guess from your point of view, and content is more than writing, but writing is obviously the spine, because if you're going to do, video, you've got scripts and stuff like that. What sort of writing is your favourite? I know you've written a book as well, haven't you?
Yeah, I wrote a book called Kingmakers, and it's all about taking the artistic side of writing and applying it commercially. So everything we've talked about up to this moment, right?
Yeah.
If you're interested in that, go snag a copy. I like longer form. I love the skill it takes, and I appreciate like the actual copywriting, short form advertising writing, like coming up with the perfect phrase with as few words as possible. I have a great appreciation, but I'm not good at that. So I've always kind of favored the longer form, a blog, ebook, kind of like telling more of a narrative rather than kind of like being super punchy. The funny thing is I actually studied the opposite in school. I studied flash fiction, which is stories like under 1,000 words, maybe even 100 words in a story. So conciseness matters, but that's still like, longer than advertising copy is even shorter than that. So that's always been my preference, because I wanted to build kind of more of a journey, like build a world, build kind of a connection with the audience that's deeper than kind of something that's surprising or might be a little bit jolting, but in a positive way. Not really my forte.
So 13 years. So that's a good chunk of time now to be in an industry that's and again we're kindred spirits in this. I've been in that same industry for that period of time and a bit more. But 13 years, a lot's happened on the landscape. For people who are, I mean, you're deep into it, obviously, but for people who are listening, who are running businesses, they're building their professional brand, they're getting out there and, day to day working with clients and trying to make stuff happen. And of course, they've got to create content over and above. Right. How have you seen the landscape change, and where do you see it currently? I mean, in the early days, it was a lot less cluttered, obviously. But in terms of formats, the landscape generally, what's your sort of big overarching take on that?
Yeah, in the early days, if you were just a great writer, you could stand out. That's all it took. All it took was publishing something that was positive, helpful to other people, and you would show up in search engine results pages and find your way to the people who are looking for what you're developing. Then there was certainly a flood of content. I feel like content reached its apex in probably 2021, somewhere around there, where it truly was the apex of it being a king. And actually our agency probably had more customers than we've ever had, is that in that time period. And then of course, up to that point, we would, early days, we'd have to convince people that content was a thing that they should do as a brand. You get past like 2015, 16, 17, you no longer have to convince anybody. They all know it. They all know content is king, right? And then you get up to about 22, and now it's like, well, content isn't so much king as much as it's just easy. And then you start to get a flood of market of just mostly AI generated, but like a lot of content flooding the market. So now it's kind of lost its value, because we call it a sea of sameness, but like there's so much, but it's not differentiated at all. So that's been a pretty big arc over 13 years. Not a whole lot of nobody knew what brand storytelling was 13 years ago, to the idea that it might be an archaic kind of craft done by hand is kind of a pretty big swing.
And it's probably a grudge for a lot of people to do. Let's be fair. I mean, if you're a bigger business, you can outsource a bit of it, and of course, we will get into AI. Don't worry about that, because that's the game's changed completely and utterly, been upended. But the basics are still the same, but the landscape's completely different now. But I guess you've also had over that period of time. It started off probably as blogging, where I cut my teeth, and that was just writing and free flowing and opinions and just putting yourself out there. And if you had a blog in the early days, you did get noticed. Then obviously writing for Twitter, and you had the whole social media thing, which social media's changed completely now. It doesn't matter at all how good your content is, even with LinkedIn, and video and short form video and longer form is really knocking it out of the park with the YouTube. So there's no one size fits all, and if anyone thinks there is, you're out of your mind.
Right.
And if you try and do all of it, you're going to go nuts. And of course, you with being a long form aficionado, you'd be rapt to see that the likes of email newsletters continue to power along, and Substack is gaining huge momentum. And then there's a lot of different platforms that support email newsletters and sort of online publications like Ghost and Beehive and that. So that's a roundabout ways. We've come right back to the written word and long form content.
How crazy is that? I think the reason for that, because everything you've described is 100% accurate. And it's all the medium of content. Like what medium is kind of like the medium du jour, right? Let's call it, right? Like which form do people lean toward today? And I think it is coming back around because I think long form content is it feels the most authentic form of content.
Yep.
Newsletters feel like they're coming from a person. It's a personal outreach, right? It's this person or brand like reaching out and saying, we think these things could be important to you too and helpful. And Substack and these like individual thought leader type of platforms that you can really push out a lot of content as an individual is a one-to-one connection feeling, even though it's a one-to-many. That authenticity is really what's lacking in more commercial content today. So it's not really surprising to me that people are defaulting back to those, simply not because I think that they're the written word, but it's just easier to be authentic or feel authentic in those mediums.
Yeah, and just to pull that thread, just one little extra tug. It's because the media, the traditional media itself, has been totally and utterly upended, and unfortunately, a lot of good writers and journalists have lost their jobs, and some are electing to leave as well, knowing the way the media is going, and seeing the writing on the wall. They're going to create the Substacks and their own newsletters and getting paid for it as well, because people are paying for good information, for good stories, for good writing. And we're seeing that in the background. It's humming along. A lot of journalists are now embracing, whereas I don't think early days they were, because they saw a lot of blogging and social media as the enemy, but now they've embraced it. And there's some amazing, and they're the people who are influencing from a PR point of view, these journalists who are becoming brand names and personal brands in their own right have incredible influence in the marketplace.
Absolutely. It's like what used to be TV channels have become people. Like people are TV channels, right? Like that's the best way to describe it, I think, at least I've come up with so far. But like you tune in, you subscribe, whatever it is, to the channel that produces the things that help you the most, that you're interested in, that are entertaining, engaging, and educational. And that's where you spend your time and attention. And that, again, not surprising at all that journalists are moving in that direction. They're fantastic storytellers. We have a number of them that work here, and they are really good. Actually, the best writer I've ever met is a member of our team, and he's a past journalist as well. So that all pans out quite a bit.
Are you ever a former journalist? I'm a former journalist, but a former working journalist, but I don't think you ever lose the journalist in you.
I think you're right. Actually, one of our core values as a company is curiosity, and we talk about this a lot. Curiosity isn't something that is like taught. I can't teach somebody to be curious.
No.
You're like curious by nature, right? And I think most journalists are. That's why they go into journalism. And that curiosity pays dividends commercially for brand storytelling as well too. So,
yeah, it's that you're spot on there. And curiosity is, I think, one of the unsung attributes of business, really, and professional life. Let's in terms of that, and I guess there's one more thing on that, is that journalists do tell good stories, and there's a reason why a lot of them are building massive followings, is because it comes down to being able to tell a good yarn and to be able to articulate a narrative. What's your approach to this, given that, where you come from and storytelling's, let me take it back a step. Storytelling in the corporate world or in the business world has been kind of rendered pretty meaningless.
Yep.
Because people are just jumping on saying you've got to tell a good story, which is all well and good, but what the hell does that mean?
Yeah.
How do you unpack that? How do you explain storytelling to your commercial clients, for example?
Yeah, I usually start with how I define brand storytelling. And I think maybe it's the same as other groups, maybe not, but I define it as the story of how you as a brand have a positive impact on your audience or your customer. Like that, I think, is your brand story. It's not really about you at all. It's about your customer, your audience, and how you improve their lives. And when you can get to the nexus of that, then you can start to build your story out from there. I think once people start to realize that it's really about emotional connection with an audience, it starts to kind of open up what it can be and actually gives it more meaning, how you make other people feel. It's kind of like brand 101, but people have a hard time like conceptualizing all of that. So that's usually how we explain it to people. A lot of people, and especially maybe younger brands and startups, believe that the brand story, or have up to that point, it's been really the origin story of the company.
Yep.
And I get that because typically it's one person or a group of people who saw some sort of like gap in ability that they had, and they went out and took a lot of risks and forged a path to help people. And so the story really becomes about that, that adventure that they took, opposed to the people that they helped. At some point in time, that brand story has to evolve and mature into, it's agnostic of the owner, it's agnostic of the founder. It doesn't matter who the people are, because those will change over time. What really matters is, your impact on another group of people. And the more you can pull at that thread, the more your content aligns with just helping your target audience, like being a helpful resource, providing education and information that makes their life better, their job, whatever it is. It really starts to open up all the doors to what you can do from a content point of view. So as long as it speaks back to kind of like that core tenet of your brand story, you can imagine all the mediums and campaigns that can branch off of the idea of like, well, how do we help our target audience? What are we subject matter experts in? How do we demonstrate our expertise online or in person, I guess, wherever, that actually helps people? And anyway, that's usually what we ground ourselves in when we talk about brand storytelling.
And I guess what's your thinking around, I mean, I think you said it earlier about, in the early days you just had to put out useful, helpful content, or utility-based content, I've always called it. And now, that's ubiquitous. Oh, I got that word out. I never usually can get that out.
Good job.
I'm very pleased with myself. I usually trip over that word, and I'm not going to use it again. It's everywhere. I mean, information is everywhere now, and information is a commodity, which means that your content has to be deeper. And as you say, storytelling and the humanity of your story matters a lot, and that's why it matters a lot more. But what about thought leadership? I call it vanguard content, where you're actually, audiences don't know what they do. They don't know what they don't know. So, a good thought leader, and not everyone is necessarily in that space, but a good sort of thought leader who's pushing boundaries and changing the way people think about a topic or an issue. What's your thinking around that type of content that's pushing boundaries a little bit more, and it might even grate with an audience, but it will probably get noticed more than ever?
I have a kind of a love affair with that type of content. And I'll talk about it a little bit deeper, but there's really two different types of content. I think the age of AI, I like to throw in terms that AI uses all the time because I find it fun, but like the age of AI, we're finding that this is becoming more and more of an issue, these two types. But the one type is informational content, content that seeks to provide an answer to a question. Then you have educational content, which is content that seeks to educate and inform the audience so they can solve problems for themselves, not just always look for an answer online, but actually solve their own problems for themselves, right? Yep. So informational content has been gobbled up by AI overviews, searching via the AI search systems that are out there, whatever, chat of your choice, right? So that is easy to get a lot of informational content. Educational content hasn't really been absorbed as much by these things. Now, they can give you steps, processes, but it's a little harder to kind of get that out of the tool. You have to know how to use it to a higher degree, and most people are using it more as chat and search functionality. So a lot of brands are shifting gears. You should always produce informational content. Let me be clear. Like, for example, our brand Content Workshop, we have a content marketing glossary on our website. And you might say, like, why would you ever? Right now, anybody can get an answer to any term in the overviews. Well, that's true, but like somebody might care what our take is on. If we're a thought leader as Content Workshop, they might care what does Content Workshop define X as? Because I think their definition might be better than what the agnostic one that I get on the internet. Also, we invest a lot more time and energy on educational content. We seek to educate people on how to solve their own problems. I think thought leadership, when done really well, is more educational than it is informational. Thought leadership, like you said, is about pushing boundaries, maybe telling people something they thought was untrue. I'm not a big fan of like, let's get the first line out that, is something controversial, but then like not actually ever have a controversial thought in all the lines thereafter. That's just a lie, essentially. You're going to lose more readers by doing that than not. But I think content that grates against what I've known to be true, and it is honest, and it is bound in an area of like educating, is when I learn the most as an individual. I learn the most when I am wrong. That's when I learn the most. I don't learn anything when I'm right. Like if somebody asks me a question and I've got the answer and I say it's X and it is X, then I don't learn anything. Yep. But if somebody asks me a question and I say it's Y, and they're like, no, actually it's X, and let me explain why, that's when I actually learn and advance as a human. So good thought leadership can grate against the norms. It can grate against what has always thought to be true, and it can get you readers as long as it's also doing the second part, which is actually educating them and being helpful and being authentic in that education.
Yep. And part of it is also it's never fully formed. I mean, a good thought leader is actually building something in public, an intellectual territory, carving out an intellectual territory in public, and not being afraid to put that out there.
100%. If you're a good thought leader, you're going to be wrong just as much as you're right, in my mind. And maybe some of that is public, some of that is just in your head, right? Whatever it is. A good thought leader is somebody who's also like learning from their audience as well, right?
Yep.
We're always constant learners. That's what a good leader is in general. A good leader doesn't say this is the path forward, and that's it. The good leader takes advice from people. They understand a situation better by doing some research, and then they make a decision, right? A leader is not somebody who gives people what they ask for. That's Correct. The opposite of a leader. That's somebody who's being led. So you'll see some, thought leadership claimed content where it's just like, well, what does the algorithm want today? What does, what's the kitschy thing that I can do today? What are the, here are the 10 things I learned about marketing on my vacation or whatever. Like that is not leading. That is following the algorithm. So anyway, that's my take on it.
And so continue with some takes here in terms of thought leadership and the art of telling stories infused in so thought leadership, challenging the status quo, coming up with these concepts, ideas, frameworks, pushing boundaries of thought, changing the way people think about topics and issues. Storytelling can play a big role in that, and if I look at who's the master, who actually is a thought leader, you'd have to say Seth Godin. He's doing that on a daily basis, and he tells a lot of stories. Yeah, a lot of stories. I reckon he's and he can tell it in such a short. With such brevity, and he's honed his craft over a time. But what's your take on storytelling within a thought leadership context?
Well, I think that storytelling, I have this little slow, I don't know if it's still my tagline on LinkedIn or not, but it's storytelling can change the world because it's the only way it ever has. So the idea of a thought leader, let's break that down into just they're a leader. Right? Leaders have always led with story for just communication purposes or to convincing people to follow them. Right? So a great thought leader needs to be a good storyteller. If you're not a good storyteller, no one's going to understand how to follow you or understand what your unique proposition is or what you're trying to tell them. Right? I forget the podcast. My wife was telling me about a podcast where she heard this CEO essentially say that there are two skills that everybody needs to learn in school today. Regardless of AI, regardless of technology, two skills. The first is storytelling, because that will take you in whatever career you're in, wherever you need to go. You can become a leader with that skill. The second is, interpersonal relationships. And the reason is those two things are tied, because good storytelling builds a relationship between an emotional connection between the person reading, consuming the content, and the person who produced the content. That's actually the true art form of storytelling, in my opinion. When it becomes art is when there's a shared emotional connection that the reader or the viewer can take with them away from it and recall that piece of art, recall that message, recall that item, and have that same emotional feeling again. Think of like an amazing piece of art, fine art you've seen in a museum, and kind of how it made you feel, like something that surprised you. And now think about it again, and you kind of feel some of those same feelings. I think that's really the deepest possible connection. And that might be some of the deepest possible connections that people can have. So, tying good storytelling into thought leadership or any content, just even narrative flow, even like, having artful word choice to engage somebody and to entice an emotion. It's what builds that connection to begin with.
So we're going to launch into the AI and unpack the whole question of AI in a minute. But just before we do, let's go one cut deeper in that. And how can someone who's running a practice, a professional practice, and they've got a couple of staff, and they're the face of the brand, and they're building their personal brand out there, and they're creating content, they're doing all the right things. How can they approach imbuing more storytelling in their work? What are a couple of things that they can look out for and be aware of that they can go away, or people to check out and to understand? Again, Seth Godin would be one of mine, but my favourites. But just so people can grasp a little bit deeper how to put stories into their work, into their content.
Yeah, Seth Godin, Simon Sinek, of course, is a great person to follow with that aspect. And if you notice, both of them will embark in emotion quite a bit in what they're doing. So that's a big takeaway. On a more tactical level, my advice would be to kind of like take a step back and kind of look at the structure of the content you're producing, whether it's a LinkedIn, a thought leadership post on LinkedIn, or, a long form blog, something like that. And look at how you can kind of break the mold of what's typical. So a lot of connection happens not when we are disruptive, but we're slightly interruptive. So think about like word choice. Be more concise with your language. Use fewer words whenever you can. Give some variety even of like sentence lengths are helpful. Don't give like a bunch of the same. You'll notice the AI writing, right? Like every sentence is about the same length, and it goes, and there's a structure, and it's a paragraph is this long, and break things up. That white space gives people time to think and connect. Always when you're producing any type of content, start with a beginning and a middle and an end. And I know that sounds fundamental, but it's missing from most content on the internet. But you want to make an argument, you want to prove that argument, and then you want to tie back what you just proved to how it makes people's lives better. That's what you need to do in every piece, and you need to have a flow. That's the narrative flow that will help induce some more storytelling. And again, don't be afraid to be vulnerable. Don't be afraid to embark on emotion or tell an emotional story. For a lot of entrepreneurs or people, small business owners, when they ask for advice on brand storytelling, I tell them just to start recording, whether it's in notes or actually video recording, how they help their customer. However they do it, just record it. You'll be really surprised in the stories that you can pull out of, like, oh, I was helping, this person this way, this day, and they said this thing. Okay, well, that is a great starting point for a piece of content. So yeah, if you kind of like look at some of the practitioners in the space that are really good that we mentioned, but also kind of do some research on how to like break up content. The last thing I'll say is if you want to be a good storyteller, you have to read more. And I know this is the hardest thing for a lot of people is like time to read, but if you want to write well, you got to read a lot. So read some contemporary fiction, some George Saunders, some Jennifer Egan, something like that like entices a lot of brain activity, and that'll help you quite a bit too.
And I second all of that. And the other thing is about I guess the easier gets, when I say the easier gets, the ways that people can start bringing more storytelling into their work, into their content, their posts, their articles, opinion pieces, etc. Is, yes, the obvious one is to go back and tell stories about their past, their professional past, and tie it into a lesson learned that's relevant to people now. That's always a good one, because people like those lessons learned. They're perennially good because you've got the scars on the knuckles, you've been in the trenches. There's usually a lesson, and that's valuable to people. And people will lean forward into a story, but also your clients. You don't have to name them. That could be a full case study, of course, but you can always. I was working with one client, blah blah blah, and what the issue was with them, and how they got out of their bind, or how we helped them get out of their bind. But making it about the client, making them the hero, or the customer the hero. What do you think about? If you wanted to make a point, you wanted to tell a story, you haven't got a client or a customer to be able to make that point. What about a fictional story as well? Are you a fan of that?
Oh yeah. I think that's fine. Really, what we're doing is demonstrating expertise, right? Like, I think it's perfectly fine to like have a fictional persona. A persona is just a fictional representation of a potential customer. Like, think of that scenario and that plug in that persona into that story. I think that's perfectly acceptable. Yep. In fact, it's a practice done by many marketers.
And what you're doing too is basically it's humanizing. The point you're trying to get across would be the way I look at it, because as humans, we love stories. We like hearing about other humans, and by humanizing our work, that's important. Which gets us to the AI question, because AI is not human, and it, as much as it pretends to be, and it's quite, when you do have conversations with Claude or Chat, they can sound very human. So that's getting quite scary in itself. But AI now, as you could almost predict this, and I'm sure a lot of us did a number of years back when it started, and the uptake of AI has just been incredible. And it's so mainstream, and it didn't take very long at all to become super mainstream. But, of course, you're always going to get people who, I need to put out more content, and they're just completely outsourcing not just their thinking, which is dangerous in itself, but their whole getting AI to write everything for them. Okay, what's your philosophy on AI, broadly speaking?
Broadly speaking, I would say that AI not only isn't human, AI isn't actually intelligence. And I think it's important that we all should understand how AI actually works and what it does. And I think if we did, we'd probably understand how to use it a little better. And there's a great, I'm going to get it wrong. I'm just going to refer people to a bunch of stuff that I don't give the right names to, but there was a fantastic podcast here in the States called Radio Lab, and they had a whole episode on AI and what it actually is. I think it's like Alien something is the title. So anyway, AI is not actually intelligence. It's not actually thinking. It's just processing, right? So AI is math. And the reason why it feels so human, and it's getting better and better and better, because it's honing in on what our expectations are from the answers. All it is a series of ones and zeros that is trying to hone down into an answer that we want. So actually, when it's giving you an answer, you know how it says all the time, oh, you're right, or I was wrong, or whatever it is. It kind of flatters you a little bit because it expects you to want that. So it is not trying to give you a factual answer. It's trying to give you the answer they think you want. So anyway, all that being said, because of that, it doesn't mean that it actually can think, nor can it attach an emotional connection to what is being said or written. That empathy is a human emotion. It cannot be. It can be they can try to mimic it with tools, but that's by definition the opposite of empathy. Then, if it's fake, it's not empathy anymore. These tools are amazing though, and they can do so much. They can process so much data. They can mimic people. They can do things at speeds that we never could. The problem we see, though, is when you outsource that thinking component to these tools, you no longer start to have kind of these avant-garde ideas that are different than an idea that's ever been had before. Because what we bring to the table as humans is the creativity in what we do is like we all have lived experiences. That thing that happened 10 years ago to us, we have no idea the actual effect it has on our decision making today, because something might come up and it might have influenced a million other things that have gone on. But we can tap into all of those experiences that are not even closely tangentially tied to the thing that we're thinking about, and it informs kind of like new ideas and creativity. So the best creative ideas are still coming from humans. How we use it today is just that, like understand what the tool is good at and what it actually does, train it to be the best it can be at those things, and then the things that humans are better at, obviously, like rely on humans to do it. Content has always been measured on one metric, and that's, is it good or not? Just because it can be done fast and cheap doesn't make it good, right? Just the same reason why you wouldn't hire an intern to represent your brand if they aren't skilled enough or have the time and market or whatever may be the maturity to do it. Why would you outsource all of the thinking and marketing and the content development to something that has had none of those experiences? That you wouldn't give to the most junior staff member, right? So what we try to do is we call it we have a lot of sayings around here for AI, but we call it the human AI human sandwich. But like all creative thought, ideation comes in. Maybe it's tools like AI are tapped in to help come up with some of those things, but humans are leading that concept. The middle is kind of like the production cycle. Like what are the things that AI can actually do faster, at a good quality, let's call it good, and then we have a QA, human in the loop at the end for the QA component of producing content, and almost always they find something that needs to be fixed, right?
Absolutely. It's I've heard it described. I'm just trying to. It was a friend of mine said it, but he was quoting someone else. But it's the best way to use AI in a content side of things is to help with ideation and to brainstorm and to get your thinking clearly. Then you kind of write it, and then you bring AI in the end. So it's kind of like bookends. And I kind of like that as a general rule, because it's a smart way of doing it. You're still getting the best out of both worlds. And well, let's look at first at the dangers of just outsourcing.
Yeah.
Because I think they're pretty obvious, but I think it's a drum we have to keep banging. What's your take on the dangers of just simply chucking out more stuff and getting ChatGPT or Claude or Perplexity or whoever to actually write it for you?
Yeah, well, the first danger certainly is like the falling into the sea of sameness gap, which is that these models are designed around predictiveness, right? Like if you actually take out your phone, if you have an iPhone and you start texting somebody, the text is going to start like predicting the next word. Like the actual technology around AI isn't, I mean, it's much more advanced, but it's similar to that. And that's machine learning, essentially. It's learning your habits. So by doing that, you're going to sound like everybody else, because by design, it was trained on a model which is the most generic model, which is the internet. And it's like, well, what word comes after this word, most likely? That doesn't help you from a marketing point of view. Like, who wants to sound like everybody else? How do you differentiate? How do you stand out? The whole point of brand storytelling and marketing is to sound different. So that's not good. So you're just going to fall into that trap of sea of sameness. Certainly there's quality differences. Like we still all the time have writers go up against these tools, and the writers are just better. I read it, and it doesn't matter if I know it's AI or not. I'm trying to like look at it objectively, and the quality is just better. It's certainly not cheaper, but it's better. The other thing to look out for is the cost scalability of these things. And I think this is like a black box that most people aren't thinking about today. Like right now, the cost of a Claude subscription, the API tokens are what they are, but these companies are all losing money on all of that stuff. So I don't know if the economy works everywhere in the world, but when you start producing a product that loses money, eventually you need to make that money. So prices go up over time, and computing prices are scaling up at a faster rate than they are raising the prices for these tokens. So inevitably, right now, I think Claude Opus, right, is one of the most expensive tools, and they're charging $15 per million output tokens, something like that. Whereas like you can get Gemini Flash for like $1 or something like that. So there's a big gap difference, but they're not even making money at $15 for a million. So start to think about that for a second. You start outsourcing all of your content production and your marketing to these tools, and these rates go up as they will over time. It will eventually become more expensive to pay for these tools than it will for the people who did it. Now, that's a problem you could solve at a later point, but you're going to be in a lot of hurt if everybody makes that decision. Lastly, there's a societal issue, which is the Ouroboros, right? Like the snake eating its own tail, right? Like if we're all producing content from AI, it's predictive based off of what's past been produced, then we will never get any new ideas. Like we are going to be in a loop of not advancing society in a knowledge point of view. And I know that you're thinking like, oh, we're talking about B2B content on the internet. People read more B2B content on the internet than they will ever read in a textbook in their life. So yes, it needs to be good and it needs to be educational, I think. So anyway, that was a lot of information, but that's generally.
No, I certainly agree. And I think this, I'm not sure in the US, I see in Australia particularly, there's starting to become a little bit of a backlash as well. Only just last week there was an academic at one of the universities had written an opinion piece for one of the newspapers, and it, because it had some phrases that AI tends to lean towards, she was accused of writing. I actually think the irony was, I think it was about AI in academia, if I recall correctly. But anyway, I mean, and she got howled down, and we see it a little bit now with leaders putting stuff out there that it's obviously AI, and they whether it actually is or not, it might actually be the way they write. People are being accused of, oh, you're using AIs, and as if that's a bad thing. And I think if you're a leader or an expert, or you're putting yourself out there as a professional brand and a thought leader, then I think that those people are going to notice that a lot more than if you're just some schmuck churning out a post and no one's really taking any notice of. I think that's we're going to see more of that. If we're seeing it now, I think we'll see more and more of that. And whether or not that turns people away from it, and that that will force them to cover it up a little bit, I'm not too sure. How do you guys approach the use of AI then? If we're saying that we don't want AI producing all our stuff, how do you use it in your day-to-day content creation and production?
It really depends on the client, and mostly the subject matter that we're creating content around. We certainly use it in content production today. We don't use it as an end-to-end magic button like solution. It's not a Alexa do the dishes, right? Like the people are still the chef, but the AI is like the dishwasher, right? Like it's doing something that nobody wants to do, that really anybody probably can do, and they're going to do it faster and better anyway. So that's the use case, right? Human creativity and people who are experts at what they do, you team them up with an understanding of how AI actually works and how it can be used in ethical use cases, and they can do that too, they become a superhero. Like we used to talk about marketing unicorns back in the day and how ridiculous that was, but like there are people who can do a lot now if they are both an expert at how to do it manually and teamed up with the knowledge and use case of AI. We're finding that left and right. Certainly. We're finding one-person teams now. That doesn't take away the need to be an expert. Like, you have to know how to do it well. You have to have discernment. You have to know what good looks like. And if you can't create it manually well, then how are you going to ever fix something that's broken when it doesn't produce something that's well, right? So that's our use case. And however we can plug it in and still get that output, and we feel like we're within those ethical bounds, within those knowledge bounds, things are factually true, and the content is good, and it meets the goal and initiative, we'll deploy the tool just like we would deploy, a typewriter over a pen and paper, or a computer over a Word, the old school word processors is as a tool, right?
So are you talking more about doing the planning of the article, for example, or the piece?
Typically, it's some. A lot of times we'll actually do that planning. We actually find a lot of value in the humans doing that part. Now, when it comes up to coming up with topic ideas, we think that AI can help influence a lot of that. But like the unique proposition, the key takeaways, the differentiator that's going to be in the article, we're finding way more value in humans doing that part of the work. Yeah. We actually, we have had a lot of success with using these tools to actually draft content, and that is pretty darn good. Now, we've had to do a lot of work creating our own models, customizing them to such a high degree and then training them because they keep doing things wrong. But the models have gotten good enough that they can learn some of those things over time. They're not good out of the box. And I think that's the big issue that a lot of people are having. It's like taking a computer out of the box and never loading it with an operating system. It doesn't know how to do those things. So that's primarily it. And then we'll use it for maybe some fine-tuned checking at the end for SEO and things like that. But then again, a human always reads it at the end. If you're not willing to read it before you hit publish, you probably don't deserve to push publish.
Yeah, that's a fair call. Yeah. And I think when you're saying training, you're saying, I mean, I know with me, I've written a couple of books. I've got access to the draft of one in particular that I've the more latest one. AI's got Claude's my favourite, has been for some time, by far the best that I've found. But I've fed it so many of my articles, 80,000 words of my book. I've been writing for a very long time, so I've been giving it a lot of work. Is that something you recommend people do, is that if you're going to embark on it, you train it on your own work so it knows your nuances and your background and the way you think and the way you write? Is that something you guys do?
Yeah, so we've actually built, we haven't given it out to the world yet, but we've built our own agent. We call it the content workshop writer agent, but essentially we've trained it on our own content that we've written, that our team members have written. We've trained it on all the advice we would give a new writer anyway to write about our brand and how to write well. All that stuff's packed in to the training of it, and it uses our own content as like a learning mechanism. But then we actually test it. We give it a bunch of tests, right? We would have a brief written and put together and give one to the best writer that we have on our team, who's still to this day way outpacing the quality of these tools. And then we'd have AI write it as well with all the training we possibly could give it. Then we would have it compare the two. What's different in this one versus this one? It's well, obviously the one written by the human is doing X, Y, and Z, and I'm not doing that. Okay, great. Start doing that. Right. So that testing helps quite a bit. Now, you have to be careful with how much content you give it to train. So let's say you're using Claude, you're using projects, right? You have files you can upload in there. All that's great. Feel free to upload as much stuff as you want. The problem you're going to face, though, is that is context windows, right? And I think a lot of people need to understand this. Every time there's a call to the mothership for Claude, it's taking some of that file information with it. And it can only take so much with it before it actually starts to degrade in the chat. So once you start to hit a certain number of tokens in the chat, your results started to grade massively. So if you have too much in the context window, it actually, all of that's going at the same time, and it's causing the chat to degrade a lot. The good news is if it's in the files and not just in the chat, don't upload the documents in the chat, put them in the files if they're going to be there forever. It's going to cache some of that and kind of truncate it so that it's not sending so much of it with it. All that being said, don't try to do too much with one session. I try to tell it to tell me every time I get close to 50 to 70% of the total window for the session, and then I have it truncate the chat and start a new one. And what I think a mistake a lot of people can make is they will give it a whole 80,000 word text, and it's going to degrade that window super fast.
Yeah, that's it's something that I've sort of noticed, particularly if you're researching and working on an idea that might become a story or even something bigger than a report or something like that. That it's you get too far down the track and it just, and you also run out of tokens.
That'll happen too.
Then you have to stop it and open a new one. So there's and I'm sure all of them are a little bit different. So depending on what your AI tool your AI poison is. You know, you need to be aware of how it works, and I mean that. I think that's something. It's just more of an awareness of people, and that's good information, David, because it's just an awareness of how these things work and how you can improve upon it to get the best value from it. I mean, I know personally, it takes me a lot longer now to write a long form article. Because I'm going deeper. I'm going deeper than I ever have. And when I'm going deep, I'll come up with new ideas that I'll put to a side and you know, I might have one session and I'll have 3 article ideas, but then I've got to get back to the one. Yeah. But I'll go a lot deeper because I want to be challenged. I want to push. I want to, and then that's how I'm using AI, and it's literally a battle of wits with it sometimes.
Yeah.
And you know, you do go backwards and forwards and you do argue, and you know, I do anyway. I'm not sure I'm the only one.
I think it's important. I think that's a valuable insight too, Trevor, because think about AI. If you think about it as not intelligence, but it's just trying to kind of like learn from us and mimic us to a degree. You're chatting with yourself, kind of. And I think if that's not thinking, I don't know what is, right? Like our mind is just our greatest friend, our greatest partner for life. So I don't know. I think that's valuable to a degree. Yeah.
No, I've found it really good, but it's, you know, and I might get down the track and then I find there's no thread I can pull in this article, but I'm double checking everything 100 times. I use a lot of examples. So I use it for researching for examples, but then I go and check them out myself. And then I will double check and sometimes triple check, you know, with Gemini or Perplexity, which is very good in checking sources, to make sure it's accurate. So if I've written the thing, I'm comfortable with Claude having an eye over it, and then I'll just triple check it elsewhere for accuracy. I don't want it changing writing. I don't want to do anything like that. Just accuracy before I'm confident, and then I'll reread it a few times and probably re-edit it. But that's why it takes me so long. But I'm returning to the craft a lot in a lot deeper way because you know, my articles are, you know, getting into the 1,500, sometimes 2,000 words because I'm going deeper, and then I need to cut back. You know, so. That's when I get ruthless and I have to chop back. So there's not one way. That's just the way I'm doing it, and that's been an organic process, and I'm going to improve that along the way. And I think the key, this is where I like it, because if you've got your information and you're writing long, this is where, you know, we're probably kindred spirits here, but, you know, if you're writing long-form content, putting some really decent stuff out that you're putting a bit of effort in, and you don't have to do it every week or every day by any means, but if you're regularly doing that, you can. This is where AI is really good, is taking that, and it can then create the social media stuff from it, because it's your work, and all it's doing is you know, shortening, pulling threads out of it. Does it get it right every time? Absolutely not. But you know, if you've got a lot of assets, getting AI to reduce those assets into bite-sized chunks, and then you have obviously go over it again and probably redo it. That's the gold. I mean, otherwise you know, if you're doing that manually, that takes the time. So that's just the way I do it. I don't know about you guys, whether you find it useful in the repurposing of your long form content of your own and your clients.
100%. We call it content atomization, but essentially taking a longer form piece or a collection of longer form pieces and then dicing them up for better or easier consumption, or maybe just like for a different audience. Like AI is actually really good at that. Now you have to still quality. You have to, like, word choice and quality. You still have to check and then make sure they're pulling the right threads. But yes, it's quite good at that.
And the other thing is, I know we're talking sort of Claude and Perplexity and ChatGPT, etc., for the research and the writing and the strategizing and all of that sort of the ideation. Is that still a word? For things. But there are other tools where, you know, when I'm finished this and I'm editing this, I use a tool called Resound, resound.fm. And it gets rid of all the ums and ahs, and it does it beautifully, and silences. And, you know, to edit that yourself years ago was just a night. Well, you hardly ever did it because it was a nightmare. But now the machine can do that, and that's what we were talking about earlier. Is it can improve the product that you've already got. You can get film. You use a tool called Opus Clips, or we're recording on Riverside, and it will take chunks out of it and turn them into short verticals to use on social media, TikTok, Instagram Reels, etc. Do they get it right? No. Do they pick the right things? No. A person is always going to pick the best chunks to edit. But is AI getting better? Absolutely, it's getting better. So I think extracting good stories and quotes and stuff out of a video conversation is a really good test in that regard, because I think humans will win absolutely every time, but AI is getting a little better and does a little bit of the hard work. So if I get 10 out of Riverside, I might use 2.
Right.
And then I'll change them anyway. So, it's not perfect by any means, but you might get a little bit out of it, but still doing a lot yourself is the goal.
100%. And that's the atomization, right? Like, it's good at taking source material and dicing it into tokens and then reserving it back up via those tokens to answer questions. So essentially, it's taking all that source material and then embedding it and and itemizing it and cataloging it, and then repackaging it together. It's so good at that.
Yep. David, this has been terrific. It's a movable feast, all of this, and it's changing all the time, and it's about I think developing a philosophy around it from a content point of view, and how to use AI tools to get the best out of yourself and your thinking, and to be able to take away those jobs that would take you a long time and you probably wouldn't do, like the atomization or the repurposing. Is someone listening to this and they've been sort of leaning too hard on AI for their content, and they've probably fallen into the trap of getting AI to do a lot more than it should, and not having their human element over it, and probably not telling enough stories and putting enough emotion in? What's one thing they should do following listening to this interview to start reclaiming their own voice?
From a selfish point of view, I'll add that they should come to our website. And the reason I say that is we're actually launching these courses to teach people how to use AI, to do these things effectively and not lose that voice. Yep. You'd be very surprised how easy it is to go down that. Maybe you wouldn't be surprised how easy it is to go down that pathway and get to that point of inauthenticity and kind of lose your thread on your brand voice. But anyway, we put together some courses on that, just simple stuff. It's going to be launched probably in the next week or two, so probably by the time this episode goes live. It's really important not to get this wrong. Building trust, which is your brand, which is your voice, takes a lot of effort. Doing what you say you're going to do over and over and over again, it takes only one instance to totally destroy it, right? Yep. So if you care about what people think about you, or you care about your, what your name means, what your brand means, how it affects other people, my suggestion is to do some more research and dive in a little bit deeper, understand what those things are. Maybe do a quick message map or persona workshop to kind of dive in a little bit deeper. Hey, go do read Start With Why by Simon Sinek. I think I got it around here somewhere. But dive in deeper to your mission, your vision, and your values, and then ask yourself, are we there? Is that what we're doing right now? Are we portraying these things to the world? And if the answer is no on any of those, just take a step back, rebuild your foundation, and then start over from there. That would be my advice. No,
that's good advice. And again, it's about over time developing a philosophy and being aware. I think awareness is the main thing. Are we sort of floating too much towards AI? Do we bring it back? How much of our voice do we want out there? How can we use it more effectively? And you can only learn by doing and reading and being aware, and that whole notion. But at the end of the day, is we want to differentiate our voice to everyone else. We don't want to be the same, so we need to put ourselves, our stories, our human emotion, our empathy into what we write, and whether that's writing for video or writing long form content for Substack, it doesn't matter. It's the same thing. So have that awareness, experiment, have a bit of fun, and go deep.
That's right.
Go deep, and never just accept what comes up first, but really put yourself into it. And I think the winners will be the people who can do that, because they can be a lot more effective with their time. They can go deeper with their research. They can expand on their ideas, but they don't lose that emotional pull that their only their voice can do. What would be the best URL to send people to for those courses?
Just contentworkshop.com. I don't know where on the website we'll publish them. I should probably find that out, but it'll be easy to find them when you get there. Once they're live, they're going to be great. We're also going to have some instructor-led ones. So if you're everybody wants to learn at their own pace, but if you really need somebody to hold you accountable and you need somebody to talk to through the process, you can actually work through it with an instructor as well.
Terrific, very, very timely. David, it's been terrific. I can't believe we've just conversed for an hour on this. This has been fantastic. So thanks very much. Much appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Trevor.